They laughed. Oh, Lord knows they did. Right there on the porch of that crumbling old house I'd been renting for near 15 years. I was walking back from the corner store, paper bag in hand, holding just enough groceries for me and my cat, Lila. And there they were, those new tenants from across the street. Young, pretty, loud, wearing jeans that cost more than my monthly pension. I passed by with my head high, even as my knees ached and my dress hung loose around my bones. Before I go on, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? I'd love to know who's out there, hearing this story with their heart. She thinks she's royalty, one of them whispered, but loud enough for me to hear. Nah, she just forgot what century she's in, the other laughed, sipping from a tall iced drink, mocking every wrinkle on my face with her perfect unlined smile. I didn't say a word, didn't flinch. I just kept walking, slow and steady, all the way up the creaky wooden steps of that old house I didn't own, but knew better than my own hands. They thought I was nothing, just some old woman clinging to past days and faded memories, poor, quiet, and invisible. But I wasn't always like this, and I, sure as sunrise, wasn't finished yet. Let me tell you how it all started. My name is Miss Loretta Mae Johnson, born and raised in the heart of Mississippi, in a shotgun house that smelled like cornbread and hard work. I grew up with red clay under my nails and gospel in my throat. My mama, Miss Thelma, used to say, "Baby, when life gets mean, you get meaner in your own way, but always with grace." I married young, too young if you ask me now. I was just 17 when I became Mrs. Loretta Davis. My husband, Charles, worked at the mill, strong and proud, until the day he wasn't. He died too soon, leaving me with 2 babies and a mountain of bills. I scrubbed floors, cooked for white families, and sold sweet potato pies by the roadside just to keep the lights on. But I never let my babies see me cry. I raised them with everything I had. Every dollar I earned went to their education, to their shoes, to their school lunches. I wore the same coat for 20 winters so they could have new ones. I sacrificed, not because I had to, but because I chose to. Years passed, and my babies grew up. They left the neighborhood, went north for better jobs, better lives. They visit when they can, send a little money when I don't ask for it. I don't blame them. The world moves fast for the young. But I stayed. And life didn't stop testing me. That house I rented, 1916 Maple Street, it was more than just a roof. It was a witness. To the laughter, the loneliness, the quiet dinners, the prayers whispered under my breath. It was the only place that still remembered me. So when I heard the landlord was selling, my heart dropped. I didn't have money, barely had credit. But something inside me, maybe the ghost of my mama, whispered, "This ain't the end. It's just the start of something you never dreamed possible." So I began. I started saving every nickel, every dime. I baked pies again, sold them at church, crocheted scarves, cleaned houses when my knees allowed it. I even picked up bottles and cans from the street, bagging them at night when no one could see me. Humiliating? Maybe. But you can't be humiliated when you're walking with purpose. That was the part they didn't see. The part those girls on the porch would never understand. I was building something. They laughed because they saw poverty, but they didn't see the power, not yet. I remember the day I decided I wouldn't die renting. It was a Wednesday. I'd just come home from cleaning Miss Darlene's house, one of them nice old ladies who always left $5 tips like she was doing you a favor. I was tired. My hands hurt from scrubbing her porcelain tub, and my back was screaming from lifting her groceries up the stairs. But that day, I walked into my kitchen, dropped my purse on the wobbly chair, and saw the notice on the counter. It had slipped in through the mail slot like a bad omen. Property for sale, accepting offers. Until August 1st, I stood there a long time just staring. The landlord hadn't said a word, just sent a paper like it didn't matter who was inside, like I was a piece of the furniture. Now I ain't never been one to panic. I made it through my husband's funeral with a straight back. I raised 2 kids on grits and grit. But that letter? It brought me to my knees. I cried on that kitchen floor like a child. Not because I didn't have money, but because that house was my last piece of something. And I was tired, Lord knows I was tired, of having nothing that was mine. After the tears dried, I got up, washed my face, and sat at the table. "I'm going to buy this house," I whispered. Not out loud, not to no one else, just to myself. But I meant it. Let me tell you a little something about what it takes to save money when you're already poor. It ain't about cutting coupons or skipping coffee. It's about sacrificing dignity, piece by piece, and hoping it'll add up to freedom. I started waking up before dawn to make hot rolls and pies. Sweet potato, apple, pecan, whatever was, in season. I'd wrap them in foil and walk from door to door, offering them to neighbors and shopkeepers. Some folks smiled and bought, others looked through me like I was invisible. I picked up cans at night, not even ashamed to say it. I wore gloves and a headscarf, hoping no one would recognize me, but even if they did, I kept going. Every nickel. I made one into a jar I kept behind a loose brick in the fireplace. And you know what the worst part was? People noticed. The same girls who laughed on the porch, Shanice and Bree, that's their names. They started whispering louder when I passed by, called me Pie Lady like it was funny. "She's still out here hustling for pennies," Shanice said one evening, loud enough for the whole block to hear. I didn't answer, because pride don't buy property, but that don't mean it didn't. Hurt. I had my days. Days when my knees swelled so bad I couldn't walk. Days when I missed my husband so much I could smell his cologne in the hallway. Days when I thought, maybe they're right. Maybe I'm too old for dreams. But then I'd hear that whisper in my head, my mama's voice, saying, "Baby, you were born with storms in your blood. Don't let the rain scare you." The breakthrough came unexpected, like blessings usually do. Miss Janine, the pastor's wife, called me one morning after church. "Loretta," she said, "I heard about the house. I know you've been trying, and I wanted to tell you. My cousin works at the credit union. She might be able to help." I didn't have no hope, to be honest. I'd been denied so many loans I stopped asking. But I dressed in my best blouse, white with little blue flowers, and I walked to that credit union with my chin up. Miss Janine's cousin, Gloria, looked me in the eye the whole time, asked me questions, took my papers, listened like I mattered. Then she smiled and said something I hadn't heard in a long, long time. "Miss Johnson, we can make this work." I almost fainted right there in that swivel chair. The terms weren't perfect, the interest wasn't low, but it was enough to put in an offer, a real offer. On a house I'd scrubbed, cried in, cooked in, prayed in, a house that had always been temporary. So I signed the papers with shaking hands. I didn't tell nobody, not my children, not my church friends, not even Lila the cat. I waited, silent, until I got the letter that said, "Offer accepted. You are now the legal owner of 1916 Maple Street." And I wept again. But this time, not from fear. This time, it was pride. It was the pride of a woman who had nothing but will, who was mocked and ignored, who stitched dignity out of crumbs and silence, and who, by the grace of God, now held the deed to her own home. And oh, if those girls on the porch only knew. But I wasn't done yet. No, baby, that house still had a part to play. The morning after I got the deed in my hands, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea, staring at that old mailbox like it was the Holy Grail. The neighborhood was still quiet, sun just barely rising, dew still clinging to the grass, and birds singing, like they knew my secret. For the first time in decades, I wasn't scared of the mailman. No overdue rent notices, no eviction threats, no pink slips or cold warnings from some landlord who never knew my name. Just me, my house, and that fragile paper proving it was mine. Still, I didn't tell nobody. Not yet. See, power tastes better when it's served cold and patient. It was a few days later when the knock came. 3 raps, loud and sharp. I opened the door and found Shanice and Bree standing on my steps, arms crossed, looking all kinds of uncomfortable. Miss Johnson, Bree said, eyes darting. You know who the new owner of this place is? The landlord just sold it. I smiled, just a little, and said, Yes, baby, I know. They blinked. Well, do you know if the new landlord's raising rent? Shanice asked, her voice tight with worry. I took a sip of my tea, slow and easy, then said, Why don't you come inside? We'll talk. Now, listen. Those girls had never stepped foot in my house. They barely said hello when they passed me by. But that day, they followed me in like lambs at a Sunday potluck. They sat on my faded floral couch, hands in their laps, looking everywhere but at me. I pulled out the deed from the drawer beside my chair, slid it across the coffee table like a royal flush in a card game. I'm the new landlord, I said softly. This house is mine now. The silence in that room was heavy. Bree's eyes widened. Shanice's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. She looked like she'd swallowed a lemon whole. You? She finally said. But how? I saved, I answered. I worked. I picked up cans, baked pies, sold what I could. I made sacrifices. And now this house belongs to me. They were quiet for a long time. And that's when something shifted. You'd think they would have left right then, run off in shame or anger, but they didn't. Shanice lowered her eyes and said something I didn't expect. I'm sorry. Miss Johnson, I didn't know you were going through all that. I wasn't going through anything, I said. I was going towards something. Bree sniffled, tried to hide it, but I saw. That moment, right there in my living room, was the first time they saw me. Not as some old poor lady in ragged shoes, not as background noise to their lives, but as a woman. A full, whole woman who'd been to hell and back and kept walking. Over the next few weeks, word got out. Folks who used to look through me now looked at me. The girls started helping carry my groceries. They sat with me on the porch some evenings, asked me questions about life, love, sacrifice. And I answered, because that's what old women do when the young finally start listening. But owning that house brought more than respect. It brought problems too. Old wiring, a leaking roof, a foundation crack that ran through the basement like a scar. I hadn't just bought a house, I'd bought every burden that came with it. But you know what? That didn't scare me, because every scar on that house matched one in me. And if I could survive mine, that house would survive too. I started fixing what I could. Bree's uncle was a contractor, and she offered to ask him for help. Said he owed her a favor. He showed up the next Saturday, gave me a decent price, and even fixed the porch steps for free. Shanice helped paint the kitchen. Said she liked old lady colors, even though I knew she meant lavender and rose. I paid them for their time, not because they asked, but because I knew what it felt like to work and not be seen. And slowly, that house started to bloom. One afternoon, I stood in the front yard, hands on my hips, looking at my little patch of heaven. It wasn't perfect. It never would be, but it was mine. And in that moment, I remembered something my mama used to say when I was little, and we'd have nothing but cornbread and greens for dinner. Poor don't mean pitiful, and old don't mean over. I smiled, because now I was both. And yet, somehow I'd never felt more alive. But let me tell you this. Just when you think life's done testing you, it throws a new question your way. And mine came with a knock on the door one night. This time, it wasn't Bree. It wasn't Shanice. It was someone from my past I thought I'd never see again. Someone who still held the key to a part of me I'd locked away long ago. The knock was different this time. It wasn't rushed or sharp like the others. It was steady. like someone who had every right to be there, who wasn't in a hurry, who came with something they weren't sure how to carry. I opened the door, and my heart stopped. There he was, Thomas Earl Davis, my oldest son. I hadn't seen him in nearly 6 years. He stood on my porch with a worn duffel bag in one hand and the kind of eyes that don't meet yours until they know if they're welcome. "Hi, Mama," he said, voice rough like gravel under bare feet. I didn't speak right away, not because I was angry, not even because I was surprised, but because seeing him pulled something from deep inside me, something I'd buried under rent receipts, empty chairs, and unanswered birthday calls. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. He smelled like bus rides and sweat, sat on my couch like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to sink into the cushions. I poured him tea, hands steady, heart shaking. "I heard you bought the house," he said after a while. "Word travels." He nodded, looked around the room like it was the first time he'd really seen it. "I was wrong, Mama," he said. "All them years, the way I left, the way I judged, I was ashamed. Now let me tell you something about shame. It's heavier than poverty, and it travels farther than guilt. I could see it in the way he sat, in the way his fingers trembled as he held that teacup. He'd left when he was just 24, got married to a girl I didn't like, and moved to Atlanta with big plans and no backup. I helped him with what little I had, sent money, made calls, prayed, but when things got bad, he disappeared. Didn't answer calls, didn't come home when his daddy died, didn't write, not even at Christmas, and now here he was, looking like he'd lost everything except the right to say he was mine. "I messed up, Mama," he said again. "I lost my job last year, then the apartment. I've been staying with a friend, but I got nowhere else to go." Now I ain't no saint, and I ain't never been one of those women who forget just because time passes. But I'm a mother, and a mother's heart don't close, it just learns how to wait. So I looked at my son, this grown man with lines on his face that hadn't been there before, and I said, "You got a place here, for as long as you need." His eyes filled with tears, but he didn't let them fall, just nodded, said, "Thank you," like it hurt to say. That night, I made cornbread and collard greens. Like old times, he ate like he hadn't tasted food in weeks. And for the first time in years, there was laughter in that kitchen again. But peace don't come without its own price. Having Thomas back meant reopening wounds I thought had healed. We talked late into the night, about his mistakes, about mine, about how silence had nearly broken us both. I told him about the pies, the cans, the jar behind the fireplace, about the sacrifices he never saw, and he told me something that made my hands go cold. "I got a daughter, Mama." That silence? It came back like a winter wind. "She's 6. Her name's Maya. Mama left when I lost the job. Said she didn't sign up for being broke. I haven't seen Maya in almost a year." I sat there stunned. A grandmother. All this time, and I didn't even know. He pulled a photo from his wallet. A little girl with big brown eyes and thick braids smiled up at me. My blood. My legacy. A piece of me living out there in the world, without even knowing my name. "I want to get her back," he said, "but I can't do it alone." That's when I knew. This house wasn't just my salvation. It was his too. The next morning, I went down to the church and asked Pastor Clay to help us find legal aid. I started setting up a room for Maya. Pink sheets, teddy bears from the thrift store, a dresser with little daisy knobs. Bree and Shanice helped paint. The walls. Said they wanted to meet her when she came. And slowly that old house transformed again. It wasn't just mine anymore. It was a sanctuary. For the broken. For the ashamed. For the ones who had wandered too far and didn't know how to find their way back. Weeks passed, then months. Thomas found work. Nothing fancy, just warehouse shifts, but steady. He started smiling again, started walking with his shoulders straight. And one sunny Saturday, we stood in the front yard, side by side, when a cab pulled up to the curb. The door opened, and out stepped Maya. She was holding a little backpack and a stuffed elephant. Her eyes scanned the house, the flowers, the porch swing, then landed on me. "You must be Grandma," she said, voice like bells in spring. I nodded, knees weak, heart full. "Yes, baby, I'm Grandma." And right then, I knew. This story wasn't about revenge. It was about redemption, about what it means to turn sorrow into shelter, laughter into legacy, and poverty into power. But there was still one chapter left, one final act that would silence every whisper and complete the circle. And it came from a letter I hadn't expected, a letter with an offer I couldn't ignore. The letter came on a Tuesday. Plain white envelope, my name in typed black letters, no return address. It looked official, cold even. I almost tossed it in the junk pile with the flyers and coupons, but something told me to open it. Inside was a formal offer, a property. Developer from downtown had been buying up houses in the neighborhood. They'd seen the renovations on mine, said they were impressed by the preservation efforts. Offered a large sum to buy it. Cash, no conditions. Enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my days. More than I'd ever had in one place. I read the letter 3 times, then sat in my kitchen for hours, just thinking. The numbers danced around in my head, whispering about new clothes, better health care, maybe even a little travel. But every time I imagined taking that money, something tugged at me. The floors I'd swept, the walls I'd painted, the tears that fell on these old wooden steps, Thomas in the next room reading to Maya, Bree laughing on the porch, Shanice teaching, Maya how to braid doll's hair in the front yard. This wasn't just a house, it was a resurrection. And you don't sell your soul for comfort. That Sunday, I called a little gathering, just a few folks from the neighborhood, Pastor Clay, Miss Janine, Bree, and Shanice, a few others. Thomas stood by me, Maya on his hip. I told them about the offer, told them how much it was, and then I told them what I said in reply. "I'm not selling." The room went quiet. "Because this house ain't just wood and nails," I said. "It's a place for healing. It's proof that nothing can stop a woman who still believes in herself." They clapped. Some cried. Bree hugged me so hard I thought she'd break a rib. But the best part came later that night. Thomas and Maya sat with me on the porch, the moon big and full over our little patch of sky. Maya leaned her head on my arm and said, "Grandma, are you famous now?" I laughed. "No, baby, I'm just finally seen." So here I am. 82. Years old, wrinkled, yes, poor, maybe in dollars, but rich in everything that counts. I was mocked for my clothes, my age, my silence, but silence can be strong, it can be patient, it can wait until the day it speaks with thunder. I didn't buy that house for revenge. I bought it because I was tired of being temporary. And now I'm a pillar, a landlord, a matriarch, a woman who turned laughter into legacy. And if you're listening, really listening, I want you to remember this. They laughed at me for being old and poor until I bought the house they rented. Now they laugh with me because they know this old lady, she owns the block. Thank you for listening to this story. If it touched your heart, make sure to subscribe to our channel and stay with us for the next story. It's already waiting for you on the screen. Because every story told by a grandmother carries the strength of generations. Click and keep listening. We'll be right here.